You know, I never thought I would be angry at a clock. But once again, anime has proven that anything is possible. And not in a good way. Hello, I'm Jacob Chimera, and welcome to the Anime Lookback at Spring 2017. Clockwork Planet was one of the first anime of the new season I both heard about and actually watched. Weeks before the seasonal lineup was announced, I started to encounter advertisements online for the show. Loot Crate even featured the franchise in one of their anime boxes. I was surprised because prior to that point I had never heard about this series. Normally, it's only popular, and therefore profitable, anime that get any kind of attention outside of Japan. I figured that with all the time and money that was being dedicated to advertising the show, there must be something special about it. Sadly, it seems that I was mistaken. Clockwork Planet takes place in a future where the world ended, but humanity was able to go on thanks to the uninhabitable surface of the Earth being covered with clockwork by a brilliant inventor known only as Y. Fast forward about 1,000 years. Naoto Miyaru is a young lad whose superpowered hearing has led him to develop a strange affection for clockwork, despite the fact he knows nothing about fixing clocks. One day, a box falls out of the sky and through the roof of Naoto's house. The box contains Ryuzu, an automaton built by the same Y who covered the planet with gears. Naoto is able to fix Ryuzu, and she decides that he is to be her master. Meanwhile, Mary Belle Brigot is a young meister in charge of maintaining the massive gears that ensure the world keeps turning without trouble. However, the ancient clockwork is malfunctioning, threatening both Japan and the entire world. She believes that the ancient automaton Ryuzu may possess the ability to fix the problem. Thus, Naoto and Mary meet. The fate of the two becomes intertwined as they uncover a government conspiracy and set out to save the world. I did find the premise to be somewhat intriguing. After all, I've always liked the stylized look of steampunk and the concept of alternate technology. However, the city in the show looks pretty much like any other futuristic city in anime. Though, to be fair, there is some interesting design work done with integrating gears and clockwork into the environment and technology. The story is kind of interesting, the main plotline being about how the military is trying to seize power. But that plotline is a bit vague and pretty much forgotten when a different group, who I think is a faction that broke off from the military, builds a giant Doomsday Device to blow up the world. The technology in the series was always more fantasy than science-based, with resonating gears replacing radio waves, and the automatons designed by Y having the ability to stop time. But the show pretty much deserts any form of logic towards the end. Naoto and Mary attain enlightenment or achieve a state where they can understand the fabric of reality or something like that. It's never fully explained. They just suddenly teleport to a world that's filled with golden light, hundreds of gears, and they're naked. Except they're not really there. They can just make gears out of nothing. There's only the vaguest of dialogue to explain what the hell is going on here, and as soon as it's over, it's pretty much just forgotten, never to be discussed again. Now let's discuss the characters. This is gonna be the main topic for the review because I have a lot to say about the characters. Some of it good, most of it bad, and all of it extremely opinionated. Let's begin with the first duo that the show introduces, Naoto and Ryuzu. By God, do I hate these two. They're terrible. They're just terrible people. There's no other word for it. Naoto is one of the vilest characters I have ever encountered in anime. He's an annoying brat who's unbelievably self-centered. When Mary finds Ryuzu in Naoto's possession, she tries to convince him to hand the automaton over to her because Ryuzu belongs to her family and they need her to fix the mechanical failures endangering the city. Naoto acts like a spoiled child and refuses to return what is essentially stolen property. Now, I could have let this pass, because Ryuzu does have a personality, and it's understandable that Naoto might get attached to her. But when Mary suggests that they come along together to fix the problems, he still refuses because he just doesn't feel like it. Even though he knows that 20 million lives are at stake, he decides he'd rather not do anything about it. And do you know what gets him to finally agree to go along with Maddie? The promise of another cute robot. Yep, he needs to be bribed with Ryuzu's younger sister Encore to get him to get off his ass and finally save millions of lives. Our main character, everybody. Don't you find his utter lack of human compassion charming? Don't you just love the way he acts like a spoiled baby when someone tries to take away his toys so they can save human lives? By God, I want to punch him in his stupid face. Oh, but wait! There's more! Later on in the story, the Doomsday Device I mentioned earlier releases an EMP that causes Halter and Ryuzu to malfunction. Naoto and Mary know that they have 72 hours before the weapon is fully operational. But Naoto takes Mary and Anker to a shopping district. They faff about for hours, Naoto cross-dresses for no reason, and finally, Mary gets upset because the world's gonna end in less than 3 days, and they're doing jack shit. Then Naoto has the gall to yell at Mary about how they can't fight the weapon because Anker isn't fully charged yet. Something he never shared with her and she had no knowledge of, so he has no right to get angry at her about it. Mary leaves and starts repairing Naoto's frickin' waifu bot for him, and when he walks into the room, instead of being grateful, he starts whining about how he wanted to be the one to repair Ryuzu. He's a selfish asswipe, yet everyone treats him like the second coming of Christ because of his super hearing. That, and he's the protagonist, so everyone needs to act like he's different from every other selfish brat on Earth. Moving on to his waifu, and yes, she is his wife because he proposed to her in the middle of a disaster. And she said yes, and it was dumb. Okay, I don't like Ryuzu, though my hatred for her pales in comparison to my hatred for Naoto. However, to be frank, my hatred for Naoto makes the sun pale in comparison. Ryuzu is annoying because she has a serious superiority complex. She constantly proclaims that she's better than every other living creature and Clockwork construct, but this directly conflicts with her other personality trait, her love of Naoto. She acts stuck-up and self-centered, yet she is totally devoted to Naoto. These character traits clash, and it comes across as awkward and forced purely for the sake of fan service, which in all reality, that's probably all it is. Next up, let's discuss the second duo of main characters that appears in the show, Mary and Halter. I actually really like these two, which I realize might be hard to believe after the sheer amount of shit I was heaping on Naoto and Ryuzu, but these two are pretty well-written characters. They have a nice dynamic, they manage to be funny when it's appropriate, and they still have some heartwarming moments. Halter is the stoic bodyguard, while Mary is the snippy youngster. It's been done before, but it works well here. Halter is Mary's guardian, and while the two like to tease each other, they genuinely care for each other, and that comes across in their behavior. They play off of each other very well. I like both of them, but Mary is definitely the best character in the show. She has a dynamic character arc that I found interesting to watch. Mary is an idealist. She fights for what she believes in, but can also get very discouraged when things don't go as planned. She truly cares about helping people and protecting the world. When she thinks Naoto and Ryuzu have been killed, Mary gets so upset that she goes off the rails trying to figure out a way to fix the problem, truly giving in to despair. This is complemented by a later scene where she's being helped by her old friends from the Meisters Guild. They all show their sincere gratitude and support for her trying so hard to do the right thing. It's rather bizarre that Mary gets so much attention dedicated to her character development when Naoto is such a flat, static character. What Mary feels and how it's affecting her is shown so well that I find it hard to believe a character as poorly written as Naoto can exist alongside her. The rest of the cast is nothing much to write home about. Outside of their appearances, they don't really contribute a whole lot to the overall story. The handful of reoccurring characters, mainly a few Meisters and Hoshinomiya, are really just there as plot devices. Though I suppose they also contribute a little bit to Mary's character arc, so that's something, I suppose. Anker doesn't have much substance to her. She's pretty much just the cutesy little girl character that needs to be included in every anime because it's a popular archetype. She does sort of have a character arc with her being conflicted about the fact she's a weapon, but all I can think about is the so-called genius Y must have been a massive idiot to give a weapon of mass destruction the personality of a little girl. At best, she would be psychologically scarred for life, and at worst, she wouldn't do the one thing you built her for. There's a cyborg mercenary that appears towards the end of the show named Vermouth. His body is destroyed in a fight with Anker, so they hook his brain up to a sex robot. Because comedy? I don't know. Yeah, there's really no reason for this. All she does after that is make a bunch of uncomfortable, unfunny sex jokes. It's awkward and unnecessary. Also, the main villain of the show is pretty lame. He's introduced in the last third of the show and is never actually given a name. And if he is, I didn't care enough to pay attention to the one time they mentioned it. So I'll just be referring to him as Old Dude. Old Dude wants to blow up the world for reasons that are unclear. From what I can make out from his vague dialogue, he lost hope in humanity or he thinks the world is an abomination because it's a flawed creation. Whatever the case, it's weak motivation to wipe out the entire human race. Old Dude goes on and on about how much he hates Y, a person who existed 1,000 years ago and he never could have met. There's never any kind of flashback or exposition explaining why he might hate Y or why he may have lost faith in humanity. When the villain wants to destroy the world for a contrived reason, and that contrived reason is never explained, that's just bad writing. Clockwork Plant had some interesting concepts, but the overall story fell flat because of vague explanations, unexplained motives, and some very poorly written characters. It's really disappointing for me to say this because Mary and Halter were good characters, and they deserve to be in a better story than this one. Maybe if Naoto and Ryuzu weren't in it, it might be a halfway decent show, but unfortunately, they're the primary focus. The few good qualities this anime has just aren't enough to redeem it. Sadly, I can't recommend it to any of you.